Hey, what's going on, everyone? I'm excited to. It was actually a funny story how Rav and I got connected. I believe I was like posting some blog posts about like laws of attraction and Neville Carter, and then he is super into all this stuff too. And he reached out on LinkedIn, saying that hey, if like I came across your website and your blog, and yeah, and then we just had like an hour long conversation. So that was awesome, man. Thanks for the feedback. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, man. Like looking back, is one of so far the best conversations I've had like this year because
Oh,
yeah, it was super like I don't know, man. It just flowed so naturally and like it was just like bouncing ideas off each other. It just felt like it was super authentic and I was just like speaking my mind and so were you and yeah, like it probably go down in as one of the best conversations I've had this year so far.
it's funny you mentioned that because I also thought the same way, right? And then reading your LinkedIn profile, I see how we have like a lot of similar uh,
Yep.
interests. Oh, to give you guys all context, so Rob is a senior sales development consultant as a part of Glint, which is one of the companies that LinkedIn owns. So I work at LinkedIn Learning, which is another one of the divisions. But anyways, so he is actually located in Singapore, so it's cool. So I'm very grateful for technology, like a phone, well, Microsoft Teams specifically, that we first connected via the like Microsoft Teams collaboration, and then also I'm grateful for Zoom to be able to just like you know if we met in person, this would have taken like if this was 100 years ago, it would have been much different. So
And it's awesome too that both of us are technically on quarantine. So like we have all the time to go about like talking about this and even set up the Zoom call because we literally just spoke like a day, like 2 days back, right?
yeah.
We're like let's just make this happen and yeah, here we are. So
Yeah.
awesome, man.
And the cool things I noticed about your profile that stuck out to me was how you said that you have a knack of engaging with people and you find joy in striking conversations and building relationships with individuals from all walks of life. Like I could have like literally just copied and pasted that into like my own profile. I
Yeah.
mean, you eloquently like said it, and I probably would have been a little bit more verbose about it, but I feel like you summed it up like pretty.
Thanks, man. Like, yeah, like I think like for me, like to your point, I love like I feel like everyone has their own unique story to who they are, who they've become. Um and yeah, I just love hearing people's story, like who they are right now, like what has influenced them to like what are some of the ideas that have influenced them to become who they are. It's something that really like keeps me going. And I think a part of it is the reason why I also like I'm also in sales, right? Because in sales you get to speak to people, you get to understand where they are right now, where they want to be, and you get to sort of like in LinkedIn you get to help them through the use of technology, for example. So yeah, it's always been something that I've been passionate about, like, really speaking to people, just randomly like chatting someone up, something that is something I've always done. Yeah.
Yeah, and to give you guys context into our conversation today, so 2 days ago when we connected, a lot of the conversations were around like laws of attraction, the secret, and more specifically, how both of us being from Southeast Asia or South Asia, and I'm Vietnamese. We talked a lot about how within a lot of like the minority groups, we don't talk about feelings um, as often as maybe like people in other countries, right? Whether it's like European countries or America. So we saw that there was a gap between um, a lot of the Asian countries. Like this is a pretty big generalization, but I guess like in modern day, like um, there's that lack of like how.
Openness.
Yeah. Where it's more practical, right? It's like become an engineer, become a doctor, become whereas like at least, and it seems like in American culture, a lot like, or it seems like people are more like, okay, it's okay to go see a psychiatrist or
Yeah,
a therapist. Like, there's no stigma behind like talking about these like feelings and things.
yeah, yeah. I get it. And like to your point, man. Like I think it's Asian parents as well, right? Like they just yeah, either want you to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer. And I think for me, growing up in Singapore, it's very much the same as well, right? And just to give some context to the people that are listening, it's super weird because like how I got in touch with Davidson 2 days ago was so we are like what 12 hours apart. Like so I'm in Singapore and you're in New York, right? So it's 8 p.m. right now here in Singapore. It's 8 a.m. for you on a Saturday. So in the morning in Singapore, so typically right now, since I'm on lockdown, I try to have like a morning routine, right? So one aspect of my morning routine is basically to read 10 pages of a book. And the current book that I'm reading now, something that was recommended to me by someone within, I would say, sort of the the subconscious mind, laws of attraction kind of community. Is this super obscure book that I've never heard of before. It's called Reality Transurfing by this guy called Vadim Zeland, right? And I don't think I spoke about this book to you, Davidson. I think I told you briefly in my message to you, but it was actually it's actually a Russian book it's a Russian book that's actually translated in English. It's super super thick, and it basically speaks about I wouldn't say just the laws of attraction, but like so Vadim Zeland is used to be a Russian quantum physicist, and I think in his studies he started to explore how quantum physics, how the mind, how the subconscious mind sort of like are super related to one another. Um, and as I was reading that, the couple of points that in that book that really resonated with me, basically things about like the laws of attraction, how like the things that you think in your subconscious mind,
Mm,
and the actions the inspired actions that you take towards those goals or I would say those visions that you have, um, suddenly just the universe also sort of plays a part in that process and also gives you certain clues or certain I would say it gives you certain connections to get what you want, right? And so I read that book at 8 a.m. I just read 10 pages of that book and I just let it sit in my mind and I just go about doing my day at work. And at 8 p.m. so 8 p.m. I'm about to off my computer and I'm just like randomly scrolling through LinkedIn and the the first thing that just pops up on my LinkedIn page is Davidson's article of the exact same thing I was reading about in the morning. I was like, what is this, right? Like it says like Kaizen coaching, laws of attraction, something around those lines, right? And I click on it and it's everything that I've been reading about, that I've been sort of thinking about mostly. And it was just super coincidental. It felt like coincidence, but I don't know, it's just super weird. So I just decided to sort of drop Davidson a message and he just calls me and just we have this 1 hour conversation about the laws of attraction, not just laws of attraction but like the subconscious mind,
yeah.
like approaching your goals with intent, and yeah, like basically like stuff around like a lot of metaphysics
Mm.
and like this kind of new age sort of philosophies, and it was just 1 hour and I didn't see the time going by as well, and something just felt like it was like it's just sort of like meant to be. But yeah, it's yeah. So that's how I think I got in touch with Davidson as well. So yeah,
And what's crazy? One of the big takeaways I got from our conversation was you were saying how, ironically, even though this stuff is new age supposedly, but if you think about it, if you go back like 1,000 years or 2,000 years, like back to the basics of like yoga and all these different philosophies, Eastern philosophies, it's actually not that new, right?
yeah,
But it's interesting because I think humans go through like the duality where I think anytime we're more focused on like physicality and more practical things, the spirituality sides of things like tend to gravitate towards us because we realize like, hey, something's missing, you know?
yeah,
And I think when you made that comment, I'm like, yeah, you're right, because like Buddhism and a lot of these different things that's like all about stillness and diving within. it's actually not new at all. Like it's been around forever, but for some reason, I think it's making a resurgence because I think we're becoming more successful, and then we're realizing like, huh, like even though I have the title, the house, the money, the income, like I'm actually there's like something that is lacking in my
Yeah,
life.
yeah. I completely agree, man. Because like I think even now, like meditation has become a thing around the world, right? Like everyone's meditating. Even like
Hmm.
you've got like corporate companies like bringing in meditation coaches like to teach meditation. You've got like Navy SEALs meditating as well. But meditation has been a practice that has been around for like ages, right? And
Yeah.
it's very interesting because I think like what I wanted to also tell you, Davidson, was that like I think the whole concept of the laws of attraction is something that has like that my understanding of it has evolved as I've grown up, right? So w- so when I first and I think I first got to understand about when I first got my first glimpse of the laws of attraction was when I first watched The Secret, and I feel like a lot of people first get into that through watching the movie The Secret, right? So in The Secret, you watch that movie, and I watched it when I was 14 years old. Um, and at that point of time, like The Secret was just visualization um and gratitude, right? And at that point of time, like I felt that. So when I was when I was 14 years old, I wanted to get into sort of like, so in Singapore you've got your junior college, or you go into a polytechnic, which is essentially your education that you receive that you have to go into before university, right? So I wanted desperately to get into this university, this college in Singapore. It's one of the top colleges in Singapore. I desperately wanted to get in, and it was so coincidental that at that point of time, like I think and before you get into this college, or you get to select which colleges that you want to get into, you've got to take this exams, right? It's national exams called the O levels. Um, and so coincidentally, I watched The Secret like 3 months before my O level exams, and and before that, I was preparing as well. So when I watched The Secret, I'm like, wow, great. I've got a goal. I wanted to get into this junior college, and now I've watched The Secret. Let's go, right? So every day, I just visualize myself getting into that school. I just visualize myself, when I receive the results, every single small little detail, I visualize it so much, and I also tried doing a gratitude list at that time as well. Um, and I was telling you, right, during our conversations, that when I got the results, I was 1 point away from getting to that college, right? And it was so weird because like I'm like, here I am, I've watched The Secret, like, and I thought honestly it was like a scam, right? It's just I've just been played like by a great scam, right? Just be grateful for something and just visualize, and you get what you want, right? But I didn't get that. So for a long period of time, like I just lost, I would say, sort of um confidence in The Secret and the whole idea behind The Secret, like being grateful and visualization, right? So, long story short, but I've always been interested in the subconscious mind, and the power of the brain. And I feel that even in science, right, we haven't really understood fully the mechanisms of how powerful the human brain is, right? You've got the mind, you've got the conscious mind, you've got the subconscious mind, right? I've always been interested. So, um, ironically, like in university, in my last year, I decided to do a sort of like a I got into like a specialization, which is basically neuroscience. So I studied neuroscience. I was attached to the Neuroscience Institute in Singapore. And that gave me a lot of time to basically study the brain, the subconscious mind, the conscious mind. And that's where I started to get more interested in the power of the subconscious mind, right? So right now, where I'm at is my ideas of the laws of attraction have definitely changed. I think at the end of the day, being grateful is important, visualization is important, but I think it's also about meeting the universe halfway, which is you can be grateful, you've got to visualize, what you want, but you've also got to take action. I feel a lot of people think that just visualization and just being grateful, you get what you want, just everything just falls from the sky, right? But that doesn't happen. You've got to meet the universe halfway, which is essentially taking action towards what you want to achieve, and from there the world will also respond to you and give you glimpses of like pathways, right? Like even this conversation is something that is so crazy that I'm having, because like I was actually telling you, Davidson, that I wanted to do a podcast, right? Like a couple of weeks ago, I was thinking of doing a podcast, basically speaking about self development, personal development, and you reached out to me and you wanted me to be on your podcast, and which now makes me think that, hey, maybe this is my first time doing a podcast. Maybe I should do one myself, right? So it's just crazy, like some of these things. But yeah, long story short, take inspired action, guys. Whoever's listening.
Yeah, and it's cool to see the compound effects because Adrian, who you listened to that episode, he's starting his own podcast now because I interviewed him and it inspired him to start his own podcast as well, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's interesting. Like, there's so many takeaways from your conversation, but I do notice that when I do read these types of books that are more into metaphysics and the subconscious mind, and to your point, I think people who don't really understand it that well, I think they think initially like, yeah, I'm just gonna like think my way into like my success, right? But I do think that's like half of it, maybe even more than half of it, right? Because I think our brains like determines like our decisions, and then our decisions determine our future. But I do think there's a component to whatever you put out is what you get back, right? Because I notice like anytime I criticize or judge someone else, it's actually a criticism of myself or it's something that I can't be with, right? But anytime I compliment someone or give praise to someone, I see it in myself as well, right? So even with you, like just reading your profile, reading all your amazing like LinkedIn recommendations, people talk about like how you treat people with sincerity. You're always happy to share your knowledge. You're like a resilient, genuine, great relationship builder, right? So like when I read things like that, like I'm like, oh yeah, I also see that in myself. So it's interesting like how it works where like whatever you put out there is like what you're gonna see. I think the best analogy I've seen is they always say like when you buy like a brand new car or something, like because I know like I bought a Nissan, well, I had a Versa, and then as soon as I bought that, I noticed every Versa that was like on the streets. But
Yeah.
then prior to that, I didn't notice like any Versa. Just kind of like because I'm like aware of it, I'm like, oh, okay, and then I start seeing it everywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Have you personally like used sort of like what are your views on like the laws of attraction, and like how has it been like beneficial, like or valuable in like your life?
Yeah, I would say like the cool thing, like one of the coolest exercise I've done, and it's this tool called creative visualization,
Yeah.
and it's like so cool when I do it. So I close my eyes and then I think about like the feelings. So for instance, I host like a lot of like reunions with my friends in my
Mhm.
coaching programs. So I'll go back and I'll think like who's there, like what are they wearing, what are the colors, what's the feelings like everyone's like happy, smiling, we're all like hugging each other,
Yeah.
and then Erin's like making funny jokes, and then Pan has her big goofy grin where she's really happy, and then Michelle's like tearing from happiness, and then like I feel like all the emotions, and then like I'll even visualize like what I say. So I'll just say like, hey, I'm happy, like we're all here together. I know it's been 3 years since we gone through this program, and I'm so happy. So I'm like kind of like almost like manifesting it, and then whenever I do things like that, like it always happens, like it comes into reality, right?
Mm.
But I think it's just like because it's top of mind, I'm more likely to take action in regards to it. So when I have that visualization throughout the next couple weeks or months, I'll plant seeds. Like I'll be like, hey, like let's host a reunion. So there's obviously the action part of it, but I think it starts with me imagining what what it's gonna be like, right? But it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Like let's say I plan all that out and like 80% of the people show up, and then there's the 20% that don't. At least like I kind of like thought it into existence prior to, like if I didn't think of it at all, it wouldn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree, man. Like, cause I personally feel that, there was like for me, I've been like a science student all my life, right? So the thing is, when I first got in touch with like the laws of attraction, anything that is not based on science, right? So and science is essentially like, you've got a hypothesis, you've got like evidence which is collected through research, and you either prove or disapprove of your hypothesis. So the way I think is always like a science student, because that's been my education all my life before I even started my corporate role, right?
Hmm.
And I think when I came across like the whole idea about the laws of attraction, the subconscious mind, I've always tried to relate it back to science, right? Like, has this been scientifically proven through research? And I think in a lot of ways, like whatever you're mentioning as well, right? Like, if you're visualizing, your brain cannot tell the difference between something that's actually happening and something that you visualized yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think I've heard of studies that have shown that, when athletes, before they even go for a run or for a race, they visualize it, the same muscle fibers sort of trigger similarly when they are running as well, which is crazy, because it just shows how powerful the mind is. Like, the mind cannot tell the difference between something that's visualized and something that's something that's really happening. So I think what you like, I think which is awesome, because like, you are basically putting yourself into the feelings and the emotions of being with your family. And I think that really sort of like, you start attracting things very similar, experiences of what you're visualizing as well. And I personally feel that, like, I think when I was younger, a lot of times, when I was in bad phases in my life, visualization, and also having a vision of what you like your life to be, something that is very, very, very important. And I think till now is something that I'm always working on, always working on being more clear on the vision, and being very clear on what I want and what I expect. Because I think it's about also having positive expectations, even if in reality the things don't go the way you want it to. Just having positive expectations puts you in, I would say, a better place of sort of achieving things that you probably never think that you could achieve as well, right? So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned with a lot of athletes. So I read a lot of biographies. Like reading biographies is probably one of my favorite pastimes.
Awesome.
And you're right. Like a lot of like almost every Olympic athlete or every you know like professional athlete, when you read their biographies, you notice the common trend that like they'll before like a big game they'll like visualize like what it's like to hold this the Super Bowl trophy, what it's
Yeah.
like to win the medal and being on the podium, and they keep. So Michael Phelps, and a lot of like Michael Phelps biography is a great one, and he's a perfect example, right? Because he's like the ultimate Olympic athlete.
Yeah.
But he'll go through like every single like stroke where he visualizes like being ahead of people, and then what his body feels like, and then the adrenaline going through his mind, and then he'll visualize every second of it, and he'll spend like 3 hours on like, even though his race is only like 10 minutes or something like that, he'll spend an hour and a half every day, every morning, visualizing every single like the practice, so that when it does happen, it's like he's like, oh, it's no surprise because I went through every single detail like in my mind, and it's so powerful. And then if Michael Phelps does it, it can't be woo woo, right? I mean, he's
Yeah.
clearly results like speak for itself.
Yeah. And I think, like, to your point as well, right? Like, I've I've read, like, someone I look up to a lot, super weird, is Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I think the reason why I look up to Arnold Schwarzenegger is,
So
if
good.
you yeah, if you just strip away like all of the, like, the action and the muscle, like,
Yeah.
if you read his biographies, he's just an ordinary guy from Austria. He didn't know how to speak English.
Hmm.
Like, he had like no connections in America. He decides to just uproot himself from, like, from Austria, relocate to America, and he became, like, what, 8-time Mr. Olympia. He became the governor of California, and a lot of it, if you read his biography, like, a lot of it has got to do with the visualization. And
Hmm.
also, I think Arnold has this concept called, and it's something that I try to incorporate in my life as well. It's called reps and sets, right? So everything's related to sort of bodybuilding, right? If you want to get good at something, increase your repetitions and increase the sets. Like, just keep on practicing and visualizing and practicing. And I think you. if you keep on doing that, like I don't think you can even fail, man. Because like even if even if you don't get what you wanted, you probably get something else that is as amazing or as awesome as what you've envisioned, right? So
Mm.
that's something that I think, to the point of athletes, right? Um, Arnold's one of them as well, and he's someone I really look up to as well.
Yeah, you know what's funny? We have so many similarities. His biography was actually one of my all-time favorite
Oh,
biographies. I
yeah,
have, like over 100 different biographies, and Arnold is like on the top five. Like it was incredible because anyone who is who can I remember like where he talks about like visualizing like the movie sets and then events, even like becoming governor, where he talks about that process, and it's just like so fascinating where yeah, I mean, he's just like a very inspiring guy. It really goes to prove that like you really can create whatever you want, right? Because he's the perfect example where he took a big risk. Like, he didn't have to come to America. He didn't have, but every single time, like he just like manifested everything, right? So it's interesting how that works. Yeah.
David said, no, if like to the people listening, I think a lot of times, right, I feel that we live in a society where we like to compare like what we have with other people, right? Like, and we live in a culture where it's always about us comparing, like we comparing ourselves with other people, like, and that plays like that plays a lot on our self-esteem and our confidence as well, right? But I think with the whole idea around like laws of attraction, getting what you want through visualization, through putting in the practice, what I've realized, and a lot of, I would say, ancient philosophy, they talk about this thing called, like, we all cut from the same cloth, right? You don't have to do like everything that you want in your life. It's already there for you. Like the person that you want to be, it's already there. It's just about being able to access parts of access parts of your being, and activate that to sort of become the person that you are, to get the things that you want, right? And it can be a lot of things, right? So I personally feel that when I was growing up, I've always compared myself to a lot of people, and when we look at athletes like Michael Phelps, Arnold Schwarzenegger, we think that we think of them as a different level
Mm.
than us, right? But I tend to think that we're all cut from the same cloth, and we've all got to find what's unique to our being. Like, and once we're able to access that, like things just like automatically just come to us, and right, like you're just able to sort of unlock that potential of your being, right? So that's what I think about the whole idea of laws of attraction, and how that's changed across time.
And you know what's fascinating about what you just said? One of the lucky privileges of doing this podcast, and what I realize actually, is that a lot of these people who I like look up to and have idolized, like my mentors, and people that are just at a much later stage in life than I am,
Yeah,
interview them for my podcast, and then the first realization I always get is like, wow, like they're so human, like we're exactly the same, right? But prior to that, and because like they're much further along, like you kind of think like, man, like they're so unique. I'm not to discredit a lot of the accomplishments they've all had,
yeah,
but it really goes to show like for instance, on Thursday I interviewed this person who led like all these coaching programs. Like she's like a master certified coach. There's only a few hundred of them in the whole world, so it's like extremely like talented, right? She coaches a lot of startups like series B, C, and D, and the founders, and like she's very successful, right? And even like listening, and then just listening to her, and then afterwards, after I reflected, like she talks about a lot of her insecurities, and then I'm just like, here you are like
yeah,
in programs where you've literally impacted like changed the lives of like hundreds of people like myself, like where I can't even like put into words like how thankful I am. And then here she is like talking about like, oh my god, I didn't put on any makeup for this, like I didn't know you were recording me, and like, and it's just so funny because like it's like on the outside she's like perfect, right? She's like has dream job, like I don't know, it's just fascinating. And then similarly, when I read all these billionaire biographies, I've read like 20 billionaire biographies, and then
yeah.
going into their inner mind, and it's like, dude, I was just having the same exact thought like yesterday. You know, it's like it's just interesting to see how that all works. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, man, because like I think there's always more than meets the eye, right? Um,
Yeah.
like yeah, and I think at the end of the day we're all human and we're all cut from the same cloth, and we all have access to the same, I would say, the same, you can call it like the supreme being, the energy, whatever you choose to call it. Like we all have access to that, and it's just about like learning how we can unlock those like potentials, and basically become the person that we are, right? um I've like when I was growing up, and I think I was telling you about this when we had our conversation, right? Like, if I can be super transparent, is that, you know, when I was growing up, when I was 14, right? Like, one big event that sort of was super emotionally charged event that made me, I think, the person that I am today was the divorce of my parents, right? There was a super emotionally charged like event that if I were to remember, a memory that really sort of, I wouldn't say it scarred me when I was 14, but it also made me who I am today, right? And I think, as a young man growing up, so I've lived with my mom since I was 14 alone, right? And growing up as a young man, I was very, like, I very impressionable, right? Like, you've got so much of like influences all around. So like when I was 14, I was like, who do I want to become, and what kind of influences do I want to bring into my life, right? And it's crazy because I think I think looking back, when I look at like my whole development, since I was 14 till the person that I am now, a lot of the influences that have come like have been through like YouTube mentors. Like I follow this guy called Elliot Hulse, and I think
Dude, I
uh,
love it.
yeah, Elliot's awesome, man. Like, and one more, and I think when I first watched one of his videos, one of his how the slogans called "Become the strongest version of yourself," right? And if you peel that back, it's such an amazing line, right? So become the strongest version of yourself, right? It's not become the strongest version of someone else, it's become the strongest version of yourself. So what is strength for you? Like I've sort of like over the years I've asked myself, what does the strongest version of Rav look like, right? What's the strongest version of, like, what do I need to have? Like, what's the kind of person that I want to be? And that is something that stuck through me s- over so many years, that a lot of the times, like when I choose something to influence me, I always ask myself, is this gonna contribute to me becoming the stronger version of myself, right? So I personally feel that, like, to the people listening, like, for me, something that I'm very very passionate about is that, looking back, I wish I had like more mentors who could have taught me, like, you know self-confidence, not just taught me self-confidence, but like, given me influences where I could build my self-confidence, taught me like investing, for example, in like money, something that it's crazy, right? Like I was having so growing up, I come from a middle class family, right? And like my family always had a lot of like problems with regards to finances, right? And I told myself, um growing up, that I will never put myself, I'll never want to have my children sort of get into the same kind of financially, I would say, a financial lag that I had as a kid, right? So a lot of times, like, these kind of negative experiences has shaped me to who I am, right? So I feel that, like, I feel like, to your point as well, like, I think I'm going off topic, but like, to your point as well, I think all these insecurities like stem from your childhood, and like they can either sort of, the way you see it when you're young can either sort of make you or break you, right? Like, you can use sort of a negative experience that you've had right now, either as a either in a positive way where you learn from your negative experiences and you sort of get something out of it, or you can just let it destroy you. And if and I think that's how people fall into like a lot of like, neurotic thinking. Like, they become anxious, they sometimes become depressed, and yeah, to your point, right? Those insecurities still exist, but like, I think it's a process of sort of understanding them better, and working with like an accountability partner, or working with a group of people to sort of, understand that, becoming more self-aware, and really trying to address those things that sometimes you might not know as well, right? So yeah.
It's so fascinating you mentioned that. So I've thought about this for such a long time. But so similarly, and it was funny, the same age, 14 was also when my dad just left with one day without telling, without telling me, right? So that, like you said, when you're that age, like it's such a crucial part of your life because like that's when you're learning and you model after like what's
Yeah.
around you. But to your point, I think that's why I was like so into like self-development because I think you always seek what you don't have.
Mm.
I think that's just human nature because you're curious. Like, because I think humans have a duality to life where we want to experience like the full range, the full spectrum, right? So similarly for me, my parents also, I would always look around and like my friends would have, and I was fortunate enough that I lived, even though we were like very poor, like we lived off of government assistance and stuff like that. Like I looked around and I saw like my friends, like my closest friends all had like beach houses or, they had parents that were around. So it was like I was always seeking that. So even in my relationship with my fiance, like her family is like almost the complete opposite of my family where and I noticed like I'm seeking that duality because like
Mm.
they're super close, like they're so close. And in my family, like I never stayed at home, like I did everything I could to escape family because I just didn't
Yeah.
want to be around that trauma.
Yeah.
And and then I noticed like because I grew up so poor, I'm gonna read every billionaire biography ever. So I follow like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk like religiously, right? And then I was like always like a shrimpy scrawny kid, so then I would like read Arnold Schwarzenegger's biography, right, which helps me do CrossFit now. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean, like now I run like these crazy races where people are like, how do but it's interesting because I was seeking that because I remember in fifth grade I got last on the mile because I had asthma. So then
Yeah.
I joined cross country and then track and winter track, and then I started doing these like you know 2.5 hour races and then 3 hour races, and now I do like 8 hour races, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting to like see the what I'm always seeking what I didn't have growing up, or what I thought I didn't have growing up.
Yeah. And those races, do they happen to be like Tough Mudder, Spartan races?
Yeah,
Because
Spartan.
I do them as well, man.
Dude, we're like, I swear
Yeah.
to God, we're like twins, man. Like
Yeah. Like Carol and Kuma.
crazy, man. But it's awesome because like when you meet someone who like just like it's like we're almost like thinking the same things. It's so
Mm.
cool because like it's just like to your point, like you're attracting these type of people, right? So nowadays, like I meet like a ton of people that are more into this. I was sharing with you how I went to this meditation retreat, and then I met this girl who was like, she's like, oh, I think you should check out Neville Garter. And then that's when I posted that article, which led us to this conversation, right? But it's
Yeah.
interesting to see how like the universe works in giving us like, what we need at the time.
Yeah. I completely agree, and I think like what I want to say specifically is that, you know a lot of times, like I've grown up with, the friends, or like the birds of the same feather flock together, right? So
Yeah.
like you're in like the people in your social circle make who you are. Like my mom always, like growing up, always said that to me. You've got to watch the people that are closest to you. But like growing up, you've never really like thought about this. You'd be like, yeah, whatever, like, and but now looking back, right, and looking at everything in retrospect, it's crazy how a lot of your influences actually, like, you're the average of the five people that you're closest to. Like, um and the influences that, it's just via osmosis, man. Like, you, you can it's just crazy because like when I think about the friends that I have, they're almost very similar to me. Like, they're all um they all like in it's just crazy the kind of things that we speak about, the kind of like the jobs that we have. It's very much, I would say, the jobs that I have very much an influence thing. And I think like growing up, and something that I probably like tell someone younger than me is watch the friends that you hang out with, right? And that also comes back to the laws of attraction, because like sometimes there are people that by circumstance are put in a place where you can't just have great influences, right? We look at like people who are born in like very poor families. Like sometimes influences are just given to you, you don't get to choose them, right? But how do you get out there? And that's where biographies, like people have come from the gutter, like people have come like rag to riches stories, like are signs where like you can actually sort of get out from the current situation that you've been put into. And I think one of that, I personally feel, is me, because when I was 14, like I was like my family was broken. Like my mom, my brother and me, we had to move out of our house, and we had to stay in a completely different house. And my mom had to sort of like feed me and my brother, and had to feed us and had to put us through school. And I told myself, wow, I never want my kids to sort of go through that as well. And I told myself, whatever influences, I was going to protect, right, the space that I had, like the kind of influences that I want to let into my life. It's just like creating those boundaries, right? Like super, super important, right? And if someone or something just doesn't vibe with you, just don't speak to them. And that's the kind of like the kind of boundary that I've set for myself. Like anything negative, anything I feel like it's a negative influence to me, anything like for example, if someone says I can't do something, or you shouldn't try it, or like someone complains a lot, like they call energy vampires. And I think in LinkedIn they talk about it a lot as well. Like people who just suck the energy out of you, just stay away from them. Like it's better if you just stay away from them than trying to change them, right? So that's something that I personally have like I personally live, and I personally try to have those boundaries as well, right? The kind of influences that you let in to your life really sort of shapes the person that you are becoming.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned. Let me ask you a question though. I do think because of our suffering in the
Yeah,
past, it does leads us to like reading these types of books, right? I think,
yeah,
let's say I didn't, have to go through like my parents' divorce and, him going to jail, and like my us like living in like government assist, low income housing and stuff like that. Like honestly, if I didn't have all those like traumatic like life altering, I don't think I would be into this stuff as much. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
my fiance, for instance, like she's lived, I would say like a relatively comfortable life, right? Like they have a family business, like they do well for themselves, but like she can care like less about any of this stuff. You know what I mean?
right, yeah,
Like anything, she's kind of like, I don't know why you're so like fascinated by this stuff. But I do think if we both didn't have these like moments where they were struggling to make ends meet, and if you had like a relatively comfortable life and you didn't have divorce and stuff like that, I don't know, like, do you think you would be into this stuff as much?
oh, that's a good question, man. Like um I think, I don't know, like to be honest, because like I think I personally think that like in a way, like I think everyone has a problem, right? Like everyone has a problem, right? Like the rich, you can talk about like the like I personally feel that you can be super super rich, but there's always a lot of aspects in your life that there's always something that is lacking, right? And I personally feel that, let's just say my parents didn't get to a divorce, like, and I'm super well to do, but my health sucks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I would definitely go into the whole idea of like I think it eventually catches up, right? So let's just say, like, from the day I was born till the day I was 30, like there's no problems at all, right? And let's just say I'm just living my life, not understanding about self-development, personal development, improvement, stuff like that. But at 30, like all the habits that I've sort of cultivated, let's just say I've got like bad eating habits, and at 31 I get like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, those sort of things, right? They catch up. So I personally feel that all of us have problems, and and to me, what I feel is that we've always got to be growing, we've always got to be adapting, we've always got to like be trying to find for what's next. There's always something that you can be better, right? And it's trying to find that gap. And I think like I said, right? Like I think laws of attraction, those sort of things, they work to a certain extent. Like for example, for me, right? Like growing up, there are a couple of problems that I saw in my life. Number one was finance. Was like the financial problems. So I told myself, when I'm going to grow, when I grow up, I want to make sure that I've got my finances tight. Like they should be solid, right? I shouldn't have to worry about putting food on the table. I shouldn't have to worry about my next month's bills. I want to create like an emergency fund, that sort of thing, right? The other problem that I saw was how like and I've seen all of this in retrospect, like how the relationship between my mom and my dad sort of started to fizzle out, like how it became so bitter. Like how can two people who love each other so much just grow bitter towards one another? And I told myself, I wanna master how to be great at relationships, right? So when you go on that path, right, no one has all the answers to everything, right? Like I think there's always something that's lacking, and it's always about finding what works better, and trying to sort of and if you have sort of a mindset of always growing or always being better, I'll for me, I'd always be on that journey, man. Like even till now, like I feel that, let's just say my finances are tight, but my relationships are like can be improved. I go read up about books on relationships, about parenting, stuff like that. Is what I'd say. Did I answer your question?
Dude, that you just helped me connect the dots on something actually. I didn't make the connection between, I think because of my parents' relationship, I'm also like, I think that's why I'm also fascinated by relationships. But I didn't connect the two that, oh, is because of my parents' relationship or lack of relationship, I guess.
Right.
Is exactly why a lot of people at LinkedIn, always acknowledge me. You know how like Bravo, you get like Bravo points for, and most of the like 9 out of 10, it's always relationships matter. But
Yeah.
it's interesting because so thanks for sharing that. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What if I'd ask you that same question? What if you didn't have that suffering, like growing up? Do you think you'd be still interested in like personal development, self-improvement?
I guess it's hard to say, right? But I do think, and maybe it's just what I'm attracted to in the people when I do a lot of these things. Like this weekend, actually, going to another self development program, which is amazing, by the way. But I don't know. Like it seems like a lot of my friends that I would say have like a more stable upbringing, it seems like they're not as fascinated by all this stuff. Whereas like when I go to all these different programs and then you dig in deeper, it's always the people that have had the most traumatic experiences that are like super into this, like to the point where like they're like obsessed almost. And I would say
Yeah.
I'm one of those people. Like I'm obsessed with growth, right? Like I'll re-listen to my sales calls like 10 times to find out like every single call, like every meeting I've ever had, I'll re-listen to it to see how I can improve. I don't
Wow.
think most people are like that. Like I think that's like obsessive, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
oh man, but I do, to your point though, I do think like yeah, like everyone could improve. Like I think that's why we're at LinkedIn. That's why you were. I mean, your product Glint is the very embodiment of what you're saying about like getting better, getting the feedback, taking the feedback. Getting a temperature check of like, all right, where can we improve? Like that's same with me. I'm working for learning, right, which is like improving your soft skills, improving like getting better. So I think that's why we're happier because we're
Yeah.
our job is like literally like what we're about, right? It's just like
Yeah.
in business form.
And like I'll add one to that as well. I think like even in sales or like it's just human nature to be motivated by the pain of losing something than to be motivated by the gain of like the motivation of getting something, right? So typically and I think like typically when you look at like when you do a sales call, like or when you speak to a prospect, it's always about like what's like you stand to lose this much of money if you don't invest in
Huh.
in our products, rather than this is what you can be in like the next 1 month. This is the kind of organization that you can be. Like, I think humans are genuinely sort of more motivated by the pain of losing something than by the motivation of actually gaining something. So I feel in a lot of ways, right? It's always pain, something that always motivates us more. I don't know, like that's for me, right? Like I think
Uh,
growing up, the pain of not being the same place that I was really motivated me to get out of the situation that I was in,
huh,
right? And it's so much more stronger, so much more emotional. Like the neck, and I think that I'm so grateful to have like those negative experiences as well. Like to your point as well, like those negative experiences made me who I am today, right? Like people like and the thing is the reason why rags to riches these kind of stories like they resonate with us so much is because you see how much of suffering, how much of obstacles that the person has to go through to get what they want, right? And that's what makes the story great, because no matter how much of like challenges or obstacles that's thrown at this person, they find a way to sort of overcome them and get what they want, as compared to like an easy, smooth sailing process, right? Like, and I think that's why we love underdog stories. We love like teams like at the bottom of like, if you look at sports, right? You love teams like that are bottom of the table and then just suddenly they come up, right? And those are the stories that sort of like resonate a lot with us. And I think, yeah, to your point, pain is something that a lot of people should use as well, like as motivation to sort of, improve and get better.
it's so this is a are you familiar? Have you ever read like Chicken Soup for the Soul?
No, not yet, man.
So it's so interesting. I remember when I was like a teenager, when I think when I was reading those types of like feel good stories because of like my past and seeing my parents fight all the time. And I remember like I guess I manifested this, but I remember reading his books and was like so fascinated. I think he sold like 100 million copies, like a very popular guy. And then last year in 2019, I actually went to a conference where he led like, and it just fell on my lap. Like Edwin, who's a LinkedIn employee, like, we talk about these types of things, and he just gave me the tickets for free. Like he's like, oh, I have a buy one get one free, so you could be my guest to come to an all day seminar by Jack Canfield. I was like Jack Canfield. He sounds familiar. And I'm like, oh, he's the guy who wrote like all these books I was like really when I was younger, like I was like really into. So
Yeah,
I feel like I manifested that. And then similarly, Lewis Howes. Have you heard of the School of Greatness?
yeah, of course, man.
So dude, so I kept listening to his podcast, and then I remember like meeting him in person, like during
Oh yeah.
yeah, and it was like such an amazing feeling. And then when I went at his conference where I met like talking about like what we attract, I remember never like I felt so happy because I've never felt like more at home, where every single person in this conference, there was like thousands of us, all were like into self-development. And it's just interesting how you manifest that stuff, right? Because I do think like at one point I was like, he keeps talking about like the conference, and I was like, oh, like, and then one day I was just like, why not? Like, let's just buy it. And then next week I was like on the flight on the way over there. But
Yeah,
it's just interesting how life works, man.
yeah. I wanted to ask you this question, right? Because like, the laws of attraction, manifestation, they've got to do with a lot of success, right? Like, so, I mean, typically no one sort of visualizes them being in a bad place, right? It's always about, being in, like being it's either about like getting loads of money, it's always about like being in a better relationship, stuff like that, right? Like, so my question is like people like, so for example, like Jeff Bezos or like Warren Buffett, like I'm sure, do you think, like I'm sure they don't do like affirmations, they don't do visualization. I don't know, like I've never heard of them doing such like these have like new age, I would say new age, like this sort of like these techniques, right? But regardless of them doing that, they're still in the current position that they're in. They're pretty successful. Like in terms of, if you look at Jeff Bezos, it's like he's one of the richest men in the world, right? So how do you explain that? Like how do you like how do you explain someone who says that you can still be um, rich, or you still can be successful without even going about sort of doing these techniques like creative visualization, or even believing in the laws of attraction?
Well, actually, I don't have you read Jeff Bezos' biography?
No.
So I read it, and he does like his own version of it, right?
Yeah.
So you know how like some people are more tactical, so he does like almost like blueprinting of the future.
Wow.
Yeah, so in his so actually like in his like biography, he talks a lot about like his creative process, and a
Yeah.
lot of it like maybe like the words are a little bit different. Like he doesn't necessarily call it laws of attraction, but he'll have a like it's almost like he's like trusting his intuition, and then there's like like these serendipitous like moments where he's like, huh, like maybe there's something there, and then like so in a way like they do plan it, they just don't call it like laws of attraction, but like they get back like what they put out a lot of times. Like a lot of these like billionaires, like um, you know, Ray Dalio's from Bridgewater, and a lot of
Yeah.
I guess their philosophy is more like if you just do the right thing and you treat people the right way and you like help everyone else around you. So if you have like a giving mentality,
Yeah.
that's how you become successful. So they do have it, but they just I guess they just don't call it that. So
Right.
yeah, that's what I've noticed. But to your point, like even like a Phil Knight, you know, who's like he became a billionaire, and like Bill Gates is like another one.
Yeah.
Like I think they see like the value in like you know Bill obviously now he's Melinda Bill Gates Foundation where he's trying to cure malaria. Like I think they get it, you know what I mean? Because they see that like hey, the more like I help people and the more good I do, the
Mm.
more like things just go my way, you know.
Yeah.
So
Davidson, like, last one question, right? Do you think that like your life right now, or like do you think your life is written sort of like or destined by a supreme being, or do you think you are able or you have the power to sort of you've got the power to sort of change your life through your decisions and your choices?
that's a damn. That's like a hard question. Yeah, and I would love to ask you the same question, but I guess I do think like it's like 50-50, right? Because I do think like these serendipitous moments, like with you and your parents, like, you know, like that like the money aspects of things, and same with mine, right? I think during it, you're kind of like, this sucks. Like, why do I have to go through this like painful, like for you not getting into that top choice, like for me not getting into LinkedIn, like, and you too, like you didn't get into
Mhm.
LinkedIn. I think if you got in like the first time, you wouldn't be as passionate. You know what I mean? And same with me. Like if I didn't get it, if I got in the first 3 times, like I don't think I would be as passionate. But because I'm in LinkedIn now, I'm so passionate. And anyone who meets me at LinkedIn is like, dude, like you're like loving it here. Like you know what I mean? Like tell from my being. And so I do think, to your point, like the supreme being is almost like, yeah, like I'm not gonna let you get it the first 3 times, because if you did that, you probably wouldn't be as like grateful that you are at LinkedIn. But now I write like gratefulness posts every day about LinkedIn. I'm acknowledging someone new every day on LinkedIn, right? And it's
Yeah.
from a genuine place of like, wow, you mean this much to LinkedIn, and this is why I'm gonna acknowledge you, you know? So, and then the other 50% of it, like you said, like you studied, right? Like you intentionally got a degree in neuroscience. Like you intentionally give back. Like you volunteer. Like there's so many things that you're doing to set yourself up for success, right? You got into recruiting, you
Mhm.
know, like there's so many things that you actively did. So I would say it's like 50-50, you know?
Right. Awesome. I think for me it's the same as well, man. Like I, I think with the whole idea of a supreme being, like no one can prove it. But I tend to think that like we have the ability to sort of we have the ability to sort of access different levels of and it's always an iterative process of like become I think we I think we attract what I think we attract who we become, and it's just about being able to become that person. Because like I think we were talking about this in our conversation 2 days back, right? Like when you want something so much, sometimes you don't get it because you're just telling the universe or whatever you call it, like you're just telling it's just an energy of desperation, right? Like it's like, for example, let's just say you want to take a girl out and you're so desperate to ask her to go out with you, she's probably not go out with you because like you're just so desperate, you just want it so bad, and you just give off this like energy of you just give off this like this this energy of lack, and you're just coming from a space of like scarcity, right? And I think we have the choice of being in a mind, and every day we have those choices, right? We get to make those choices every single day. Like we get to choose whether we want to operate in sort of like an abundance mindset, and a mindset of gratitude and mindset of love, joy, and go about our day, or we can operate in a day where everything's just scarce. And we all have those days as well, right? It's how like and I feel like it's about consistency. Like how long can we keep on going in operating in the mindset of abundance such that it becomes second nature to us? And once that becomes second nature, we become like an evolution of like become someone completely different, and we just start attracting bigger things, right? Greater things. And yeah, I think it's 50-50 as well, man. Like I haven't really thought about it, but like now when I am actually like saying it out, it feels like it is 50-50 because like half of it you've got to meet everything halfway. You've got to meet the universe halfway. You've got to meet like the world halfway. You can't expect things to just fall off the sky the minute you sort of visualize it. You've got to take that first step. You've got to intend for things to happen in your life. And yeah, that's what I think as well.
Yeah, man.
Putting in the work. Yeah, yeah.
Well, thanks, Rob. This has been an amazing conversation. Time flies by, man. Like an hour with you, like literally flies by like so quickly. Like that's just how it is. But I think, when you're coming in from a place of like just being, like we didn't even prepare for this, right? We just like went into it, which is awesome. And I would say some of the like the main takeaways I've gotten from our conversation is definitely like who you surround yourself with is really important because that'll determine a lot of the thoughts and the programming that goes around in your mind, right? If you're hanging out with people who are very positive, people that are like, oh, I can make President's Club, right? People that are like just have that energy about them that you just want to be near them, then you in turn will also pick up on a lot of the same habits and the same routines and the same thought processes. I would say I also learned about like I feel like you're like super grounded, like you're like because you have the science aspects, right? With the with like neuroscience, where you're like, hey, I test a hypothesis, and then that will determine if I could continue with this like this this way of being versus like so because I do think sometimes when people are too like woo woo, like people
Yeah.
get turned off by that, but I feel like you have a good sense of like the practicality of things, but then also testing like different hypotheses and seeing like what works best for you. So yeah, man. Any other like good summaries that you've gotten from this conversation?
Dude, I just want to say I'm very appreciative and I'm super grateful you got me on board your podcast, man. Like, I think what I got of this, what I got of this podcast is essentially like, for me, um, if it feels right, just go and do it, and regardless of, I would say, the results, regardless of like regardless of the results, like me being on this podcast is something that what just felt right, and I'm gonna be on this, even though I've never been on any podcast before. That's one. Second is like it felt. Second is I think that like I the second thing that I got out of this conversation. I'm just trying to summarize my thoughts real quick, right? So
Mhm.
second thing is I think when you genuinely come from a place of, I would say, of abundance, when you come from a place of gratitude, um, you kind of attract the people, um, the same kind of people that who are who are who's who you are looking to become, like, right? Like, for example, this entire conversation is like, Davidson, you're like in New York. I'm in Singapore. It's miles away, man. But like only through this conversation did I know that we share so much like similarities. Like, what are the odds, right, that the two of us would sort of have this conversation right now, like on a Saturday, like 2 days ago was the first time we started talking. It's just crazy. Sometimes it feels like it's so crazy to me that this is even happening, but just it just felt right, and it was just the person that I was sort of like I was wanting to become, right? Someone who has an abundance mindset, who's a mindset of abundance, someone who wants to share, someone like I the way that the conversation between me and Davidson, how it started was, hey man, I love your podcast. Like, you've got one new follower. Just know that you've got one new follower. I love your blog. I'm just going to read more of whatever you're posting right now, right? It's just I wasn't asking anything from him, and he decided to just, it's like it felt like it felt like a dance, man. Like it's just so it's just crazy sometimes. So like I personally feel like um keep on working towards becoming the person that you want to become, and the universe will also sort of respond to that through your connections, through the material, through like certain, I would say, influences that just come about through various means. Like I got to know Davidson through like a random LinkedIn post at 8 p.m. when I was just scrolling LinkedIn randomly, right? And that's how we got connected. So I'd say just keep on thinking about what you want, have a vision for yourself, write down your goals, but also work towards those goals. And yeah, man, those are some of the takeaways that I got from our conversation. And yeah, just very, very appreciative and grateful to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, and it is kind of crazy if you think about it, right? Because just if you just take it in and just be present for a moment, it's like not only is it interesting how it's literally 9:09 p.m. over there, right? So it's like it's like in where if I look out the window, it's like literally like the day just started, like the sunrise wasn't too far long ago. And then it's interesting to see how we're at a place in this world in 2020 where like the people who are listening, because I look back at my podcast, and it's interesting where it's like people from Canada, people from Australia, people from the UK, right? And it's like just to be able to reach and touch so many lives, and even people who are listening 10 years from now, right? Because I know for me, like when I listen to Lewis Howes podcast or all these people who I follow, I'll listen to their podcast even from 5 years ago. And it's interesting to think like how many lives like you'll touch, like even people who maybe aren't even born yet. This is just crazy to think, right?
Yeah,
That they might go and listen, whether it's when you start your own podcast or whatever it is, when you write your own book, right? And in the amount of lives that you touch, like universally, just from like the energy that you're putting out, right? So it's just very interesting to see that sometimes we can't even think of like the impact that we have,
right.
but it's to your point, like doing the right things. And just like for you, like you were compelled to like read up books on law attractions, and then that led you to like sharing it with your friends, and then eventually, before you know it, it's like 1,000 people listen to this very episode, and then they might start their own podcast, or they might start looking into like some of the books that we've been talking about, right? Or
Right.
Elliot as well, maybe they start listening to Elliot, and then they become like their own Elliot, what I mean, their version of it. And it's just interesting to see how that all like folds. So thank you.
Thank you, man. Like, yeah, awesome. It's awesome. It was thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll be back on and talk about, as we like progress in our lives and stuff. It'd be cool to like continue, and then it'd be cool to see us like manifest other things in our lives, and then we can
Yeah,
maybe talk about that process and what was your visualization process like and all that stuff. So
that'd be awesome. Awesome.
cool, man. Thanks, Rob. We'll have a good night. And yeah,
Have a great day ahead, man.
take care.
Awesome. Take care.